And good morning, America. I'm Ann Vandersteel, and welcome back to the War Zone. We are still here at Steel News, tackling all the issues. And as I think it's really obvious that we are still standing at a major constitutional crossroads with a recent demotion of the great Ed Martin, basically being stuffed into a, should we say, closet at the DOJ, stripping him of the duties that he was supposed to be doing, which is fighting the weaponization against we, the American people, by our federal tyrannical government, which is nothing more than a corporatocracy. This isn't theoretical, folks. We're not even living through an academic application of this. This is real. This is immediate. This is consequential, what's happening. The Epstein Files promised transparency, right? We received what? We received redactions, chaos. We've been sidelined. We've been called panicans. We've been abused by the supposed, folks that were with us on trying to get, total transparency. But what do we have? We have victims who've been exposed. We have missing pages, and we have a DOJ that is now going back and re-redacting Trump's name out. Why didn't they get it right the first time? If in fact they screwed up, why aren't they fired right now? Why is it Bondi and Todd Blanche, who's spending more time on Fox News than Bondi, if you can believe that? Why aren't they fired? The Department of Justice claims to be neutral. Bullcrap. They're anything but. And I'm sure that I am not standing alone when I say the public sees this as total selective enforcement. This is what we would call creative legal theories. And their credibility, it's shot. There is not even a gap anymore. It's gone. So we've got a lot to talk about today. We've got a great guest coming on. We're going to cover the waterfront here. My good friend, somebody who I've known now for over a year, a couple of years, in fact, because I've done some speaking engagements where I actually met this incredible gentleman, is Don Brown. He's a Navy veteran. He's a constitutional attorney. He's a U.S. Senate candidate in North Carolina. And he has earned the endorsement of what I consider to be the most coveted organization when it comes to standing for health freedom. They're called Stand for Health Freedom, and they're filing mandates in federal court. They've been defending religious liberty, and they've been helping save American jobs through litigation. Don Brown's platform is very direct. It's very America first. He's being challenged by Michael Whatley, who is a complete swamp rhino and was the former chair of the RNC. That should tell you everything you need to know, because we know the Republican club is not MAGA. They're not America first. They're showing us that in some of the endorsements that they're making. Don Brown's pro-life. He's always been. Faith and family, they're not negotiable in Don Brown's world. Immigration enforced under the law, something that we're just now starting to see, but it's not happening fast enough. And of course, election integrity grounded in the Constitution. So I'm going to bring in Don Brown right now, because we do need to have somebody that has some sense of restoring the republic. And North Carolina is critical in that fight, folks. If you're not aware of this, a stat that I just learned this morning, there's 208 mosques in North Carolina. A fight we've been fighting in Florida, a fight we're seeing all over the country, 2,800 mosques that I would liken these to be called forward operating bases for the radical Islamic invasion of America. So without further ado, welcoming Don Brown. Don, it is great to have you with me today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy campaign schedule. You've got a primary coming up here shortly.
We do. Thank you for having me, Ann. You're a friend not only to me, but to the state of North Carolina, especially to the western counties, the 25 or so western counties where you have been a warrior in exposing truth, exposing the abuses of FEMA, the obstructionism that our people have had to endure. The latest estimate was that they still need $60 billion to fully rebuild. Now we've had a second cold winter with some folks still homeless or without having restored to their homes. And so thank you for what you've done for our state. I wish I could get you to move here, but you got a lot of great places. But we love you here in the state, and I really appreciate the opportunity to spend a few minutes with you this morning.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And North Carolina, the people there are definitely family to me. My family was from there and fought in the Revolutionary War there. So I absolutely felt compelled to, put a spotlight on that. And North Carolina still needs massive attention. I know that the toll there is nowhere near being close to being reckoned with, because it was so catastrophic. And the winter you're having right now, I posted yesterday, friends that actually are studying the poisons that are being sprayed in the atmosphere and are now being, dissolved into the soil across this country from Colorado into the east is really quite alarming, including radioactive materials, infectious agents, synthetic diseases. I mean, it's really catastrophic what is going on, and yet we don't seem to be able to grapple with that. But I want to start a little bit, because it's recently in the news, and we're going to get to a lot of topics here. But Epstein Files. Give me your first blush on what you think is happening right now, because it seems to be a pretty sophisticated psychological operation on so many levels.
Well, first off, Republicans and Americans elected Donald Trump in part on the promise to prosecute these Epstein predators. And I've asked the question many times, What billionaire has the right to have sex with a kid and get away with it?
Right.
Who are these people? And I'm the only U.S. Senate candidate in North Carolina, as far as I'm aware, and very few Republican candidates, I should say, have called early on for the release of those files. We've been consistent there. Why we have seen no prosecutions leads to a broader question, not just in the failure to prosecute any Epstein cases, but the failure to prosecute many other deep state actors who tried to bastardize the Department of Justice during the Biden administration. There seems to be a leadership failure, at least at the top of the Department of Justice. We see now this Todd Blanche, who, as I understand it, unless I'm wrong about this, was a registered Democrat in New York until 2024, has relieved, has relieved Ed Martin as head of what would have been a weaponization of government task force. And so the Justice Department appears to be going back into its complacent ways of turning the left out of leftists and billionaires and corporate interests and big donors and letting them get away with bloody murder. And we got to change that. I think we're going to need a change in the leadership of the Justice Department ASAP. We needed America First Justice Department. The Justice Department, by weaponizing, by allowing the FBI to be weaponized, allowing the courts to be weaponized, has waged war on the United States Constitution. And the failure to take action in these Epstein, there are hundreds and hundreds. Listen, we know Maxwell, pled guilty to trafficking. We know that Jeffrey Epstein himself, quote unquote, committed suicide. You understand the quotation marks here.
Right.
We know there was a massive child sex ring going on, and not to have one single prosecution after a year of Pam Bondi is beyond inexcusable. I don't know why this is the case, but I'm going to continue to beat this drum until we get an answer or see some movement.
Well, we definitely need an answer. You've got Tina Peters, who is sitting here in a horrific prison in the state of Colorado, and she's been attacked several times. She's been mistreated. She's in solitary at the moment. And then you've got Ghislaine Maxwell, who gets a visit from Todd Blanche, and she gets moved to a minimum security prison, likened to a country club when it comes to prisons. And again, the Epstein file redaction situation is ridiculous. President Trump should be firing Blanche and Bonnie at this point in time for the fact that his name and I listened to Owen Troy about this last night. Owen said, we're supposed to redact Trump's name. Okay, you understand that he's president, I guess, right? But then they didn't do all the redactions. And now we're seeing them go back and re-redact after they've released the files a month late. So is it incompetence? Is it blackmail? Is it threats? What are these people doing? And why does President Trump stand for it at this point? It's, we're trying to restore the republic. You're putting your family and your life on the line to stand up for North Carolinians that have been abused by the same federal government. And yet we can't seem to get ourselves out of this Gordian knot when it comes to the tyranny from the feds.
Well, you're asking all the right questions. I wish I had the answers. We know that at the very least it is neglect, and that is giving them the benefit of the doubt. Just like the Justice Department's failure to timely prosecute Letitia James and Jim Comey in Virginia. All they had to do was bring an indictment within 120 days. They let the time run, and those cases got dismissed on what most would call a technicality, is absolute professional incompetence. And so the failure to redact a continuation of that incompetence, that's the best case scenario for them. That is the light and most favorable to the Justice Department. They just screwed up. The bigger question is it by design? And it smells like that to me.
It does.
This is inexcusable. From the beginning, I've been calling for the prosecution of these prosecutors. In my book, Kangaroo Court, and I've been saying this all along, I want to see rogue prosecutor laws. Jack Smith should be prosecuted. Letitia James, Fannie Willis, Alvin Bragg, Kimberly Gardner, the Soros-financed prosecutor out in St. Louis that famously prosecuted the McCloskeys, who were simply holding their weapons. She should be prosecuted because these people, Ann, have bastardized our precious system of justice, where justice is supposed to be blind. And they've not just gone after political leaders like President Trump, they've gone after average Americans. You remember Douglas Mackey from there, not far from you in Florida in 2016.
Right.
Well, here's what he does. A cartoon lampooning Hillary voters as being pretty dumb. Well, I happen to agree with that. I think a lot of Hillary voters are pretty dumb. In 2021, 5 years later, when Biden takes over, the corrupt Justice Department prosecutes Mackey for a cartoon he did 5 years earlier, which he had every right under the First Amendment to do, as freedom of speech, prosecutes him for interfering in the election. And they go after pro-life fathers. As soon as the Dobbs decision overturns Roe, they go on a rampage against Mark Houck up in Philadelphia, a pro-life Catholic guy and they go after Paul Vaughn in Tennessee, and they go after an 89-year-old concentration camp survivor named Ava Edel. All these folks were doing in the last two cases of Paul and Ava were singing and praying, singing hymns and praying in front of the abortion clinic, and local prosecutors declined to prosecute, and the weaponized Justice Department went after them. You know, we ought to be going after these prosecutors and prosecuting them, because if we don't, if they take power again, and it's all over with. So I'm very, very disappointed with the leadership of the DOJ. Nothing smells right about it. It's reeks of cover up for billionaires, big donors, politicians, and we're going to continue to raise hell until we get an answer. We're not going away. I want you hear my voice, and you're part of the deep state. We are coming after you, and you know, we're going to get answers, and we're going to get justice. It will happen. That's
exactly what we need to hear every state senator saying, representing their great state. And this is why North Carolina needs Don Brown, because if you're going to juxtapose, I'm going to jump over to Whatley here real quick, and then I want to come back to this discussion. You know, Whatley to me is the face of the swamp. He's the RNC chair, former RNC chair. And when I look at the recommendations coming out of the RNC and out of the Florida GOP, essentially the Republican Party of Florida, the endorsements that are being made and the candidates that they're trying to put forth are antithetical to what the Republicans, the real Florida Republicans want, the voting republic. The good news is they have President Trump in the state of Florida. So he carries a lot of weight, and our registered voters are up huge. All this is great, but when you look at the voting record of the people, or the people that are running, that are being endorsed by these same big institutional Republican organizations, it does not reflect the will of the people from where I'm sitting. So let's talk about Whatley and the fact that he simply just won't debate you. And there's been numerous instances where you've been asked by big media in your state to do debates, and yet he just doesn't even respond. Is he afraid? Is he just not getting the message? What's going on?
Well, certainly he's afraid. People ask, why did you jump into this race? Hedseth is a friend of mine. Pete Hedseth and I have worked on military rules of engagement cases, worked very closely on the Clinton Rants case for almost 2 years to get the president finally to pardon Clinton, let him out of prison. And Tillis, I say Whatley, they're interchangeable. Tom Tillis, our senior senator, promised that he would, if a presidential nominee cleared the jurisdictional committee in the Senate, in this case, the Armed Services Committee, he'd leave him alone. Tillis would support that candidate. Pete cleared the Senate Armed Services Committee, and Tillis went to war with him, trying to take his nomination down still. He failed. He did take down Ed Martin as U.S. attorney. He went after the president on tariffs. More recently, he's announced opposition to the president's nominee for Fed chair. But after Tillis went after Pete Hegseth and Ed Martin, that was in February a year ago. In March, while Tom Tillis was still in the race, and while Mike Whatley was still RNC chair, Whatley goes to Raleigh and endorses Tillis. Whatley endorses this anti-Trump obstructionism against great patriot nominees right there in Raleigh. And so he has been in bed with Tom Tillis. I've repeatedly hit him every time a couple of weeks ago, Tillis goes to Denmark to try to undermine the president on Greenland, totally out of Tillis' jurisdiction. I call Whatley out for saying nothing, zippo. So to your question on debates, there have been 4 debate opportunities against me that Whatley has turned down. The first was the Onslow County Republican Party last October. They invited me, had invited Andy Nilsson, another competitor, a friend of mine who's left the race, and Whatley. Andy and I accepted. Whatley refused. Then we had a major Charlotte TV station. I won't give the call sign, but a major Charlotte TV station wanted to arrange a debate in their studio between me and Whatley. Our campaign accepted. Whatley blew them off. Then in Asheville, you've been there and spent a lot of time in Buncombe County in your work as a journalist there, and a major radio station, same thing, invited us to debate, invited Whatley to debate. We accepted. Whatley said no. And then one of the North Carolina Republican congressional districts, the chair of that district, wanted to set the debate between me and Whatley. We said yes. Whatley said no. He is afraid to debate. I don't know if he knows how to debate. I don't know what he knows about policy. If you go to his website, you won't see anything about policy. Yesterday, he posted a picture of himself eating a biscuit in front of Biscuitville. That's not policy. And he talks about Trump. Trump. That's all he says, Trump. But he lets his buddy Tillis, who he endorsed, by the way, continue to trash the president's nominees and doesn't say one single word. This is Tillis Light. This is Tillis 2.0. And I hope our North Carolina Republicans wake up and smell the coffee before it's too late, because we're coming up on early voting here now. And I'm looking at my calendar, in about 9 days, February 12th, early voting begins in North Carolina.
It's really remarkable to me at the game that is played, and frankly, it's all in the media now, because social media reaches a certain demographic, but you still have to get on mainstream media, and the fact that he's avoiding you on mainstream media basically says it all. That's where he knows he's going to be getting the eyeballs of the base that are Trump supporters, and if Trump says something, it must be good. And frankly, unfortunately, what we're seeing right now is, and this is not out of disrespect to the president, but he's not in control of this wayward corporatocracy called the federal government. It's got a mind of its own. It's a swamp of its own. It's a sewer that needs to be drained. And, he's just not there yet. And the fact that Ed Martin has been, demoted is really indicative of that, because he was working on the most crucial part, which is the weaponization piece, something that North Carolina has experienced when it comes to FEMA. You all know what it's like to be the victim of weaponized federal government when it comes to an institution that went in there, not for the express purpose of helping the residents and the people who lost everything, but more to enrich themselves. Right. And frankly, I think they had a whole other agenda, but that's another conversation. So let's talk about some of the things that, I know you're an expert on, the FACE Act, what recently happened with Don Lemon getting arrested as he led people into a house of worship and made a scene in there. He was actually arrested. And I juxtapose that to say someone like Jake Lang, a J6er who's now out. He's also running in for Congress, but he's taking a lot more, should we say, of a different attack. Going into protests where he's insulting Muslims with bacon and the Quran and threatening to burn the Quran, and just really trying to get in their face and get them agitated. He did not enter a house of worship. What is the difference between what Don Lemon did and say what Jake Lang is doing to insult, different people that are both of religious, nature?
Right. Well, first off, as far as Sharia and Islam go, I've raised the issue as to whether it should even be considered, given religious protectionism in the First Amendment. I think it is a political philosophy. Most major religions of the world, and I'm a Christian, you're a Christian, we have Jewish friends. But regardless, most major religions of the world emphasize, peace, tranquility, prosperity, and love. Although we Christians believe that we can't earn our way in through works, but those are common characteristics. Islam is submit or be killed. To me, it is not. That is not a religious philosophy; it's a political philosophy. But let's go back to the FACE Act for a second. A number of us. Leading conservatives, I don't know about leading conservative, but for a number of years, we called for the repeal of the FACE Act. It was rammed in through Bill Clinton in the 103rd Congress as a means of protecting abortion clinics. But in order to sell it politically, while Section A of the Act, 18 U.S.C. 248, basically says anybody who obstructs, impedes, or otherwise interferes with an abortion clinic is going to be punishable by 1 year in prison as a felony. Subsection B says the same thing about houses of worship. Anybody who obstructs, interferes, impedes or interferes Christians in the act, or I should say religious people in the act of exercising their First Amendment rights, is also guilty. Even though they had to sell it politically by saying we'll protect houses of worship also, the corrupt Justice Department has used it solely to attack Christians exercising their beliefs peacefully at abortion clinics. Never has it been used until possibly now to step in and defend Christians. So what Don Lemon did and the 6 or so others who have now been charged under various Civil Rights Acts and the FACE Act is they went into the house of worship, they interfered with it, they impeded it. And so the FACE Act now, for the first time in a significant case, is being used to step in and defend Christians who are worshiping. And Don Lemon's argument he's protected by the First Amendment is garbage, because the First Amendment applies into the public square, on the sidewalks, and the courthouse steps, not in private homes, not in private businesses, not in private houses of worship. You can regulate whatever speech you want in your home, Ann, as you know, or you can fix the way out. So it is now being applied in a way that we promised it would be applied. It's kind of an irony if you think about it. You pass an act that on the one hand protects abortions and on the other hand protects Christians. It's just an oxymoronic contradiction. But now, but they are applying it now against women, and they should do that because they've never done it before. With regard to the other case you're mentioning, first of all, I don't, as I say, I don't consider these Islamic mosques to have First Amendment protection for religious reasons, because Islam says submit or die. And
Right.
in that case, he appeared to be agitating them outside of the mosques themselves, and that's different from what the application of the FACE Act allows. So,
Would you consider Sharia law compatible with the Constitution?
not only do I think it is not compatible, and I'm the only United States Senate race in the country who is called, I've said this, we've got a problem not only with illegal immigration, where the Democrats opened up the borders for 4 years and brought in every Tom, Dick, and Harry with every disease you can think of. They wanted us to take the jab. They don't care about them taking the jab. That's illegal immigration. We lost more Americans 1 year to fentanyl than 10 years to Vietnam War. But also the legal immigration problem, where there is H-1B, basically,
right,
bastardizing the original purpose of bringing in people who are not to supplant American jobs. And here's the other thing. You have to trace it back to the 1965 Hart-Celler Act. LBJ goes to Ellis Island, and they change everything. They reduce the number of European immigrants and start focusing on immigrants from these Sharia countries. Then, in addition to that, they put in block migration, and the disaster started from there. So, to your question, Sharia is at war with the United States Constitution because it sets out to make itself the supreme law of the land, not the Constitution, the supreme law of the land. So, back on a point, I'm the only Senate candidate in the country who has called for reforming our legal immigration statutes to prohibit immigration from Sharia countries, except in the most extreme circumstances where there is religious persecution, say from Jews, of Christians and Jews who are being persecuted religiously. Other than that, we ought to shut immigration down from Sharia countries altogether and end it, because we are bringing in a philosophy that is at war with the very foundation of our constitutional republic. Now, to some that may sound radical, I don't care. I'm here to defend the Constitution, to defend you, defend my kids, my grandkids, and everyone else that we love. So I don't care how that sounds. We need to shut down Sharia immigration altogether. President Trump, if you recall, in the 2017 signed a travel ban to stop temporarily immigration from 7 predominantly Shia countries, Sharia nations. The Democrats filed suit. 2 federal judges struck it down. One, a guy named Robart in Washington State, another Derek Watson in Hawaii, who is Obama's Harvard law school classmate. It took 1 year and 4 months and for the U.S. Supreme Court to reverse those unconstitutional orders. In the meantime, Sharia immigrants came in. We got to get tough with this. We have to understand what they do. We have to understand there have been more persecution and deaths under Sharia than any of the major evil isms, Nazism, communism, and as Winston Churchill called them, Mohammedism. That's what Churchill called it. He really saw that early on, and we've got to recognize the evil for what it is. We got to root out communism. We got to root out Nazism. We got to root out Mohammedism, as far as I'm concerned. I'll say it, and some people might not like it, but I don't care.
Well, no, I agree with you. It needs to be said. We were a nation founded on Christian values. You have the right to worship, and I agree with you. I don't think Islam and Sharia law particularly are compatible with the U.S. Constitution, not in how they worship, for the very reasons that you stated. Let's fast forward to going forward in the future. You are now U.S. Senator representing North Carolina. You realize you're going into the swamp. D.C. is just the den of iniquities from where I'm sitting. Yeah. Who do you see yourself aligning with? Number one, what committees would you like to be on so that you can be most effective?
Those are great questions. And first of all, let me just say, let me do the easy part first. Committees, obviously, armed services, judiciary, and believe it or not, agriculture. I'm a defender against the massive regulatory attacks against small farmers, against gardeners, against small slaughterhouses. So those are the 3 that I would covet the most. Now, back on who to ally with, we have a very we have a republic. We allegedly have a Republican majority in the Senate. Let me put it that way.
Right.
We have
stated.
We have weak rhinos in the Senate. I like Mike Lee. I like both the guys from Missouri, or Schmidt and Hawley. I like those guys. I would have probably voted for Ron Scott, the senator from Florida, over Thune as majority leader. I like Senator Kennedy in Louisiana. I think I see a lot of things I like out of Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, and I'm just shooting from the hip because you asked a question.
Right.
Those are the guys that pop off. Marsha Blackburn from
What
Tennessee.
areas, what specifically are they doing that you have an affinity for? Is it in armed services? Is it in weaponization of federal government? What is it that they're focused on that you see yourself aligned with?
I think, and Rand Paul in some ways also. I think the concern, first of all, the concern over the national debt is crucial, and I'm preaching this everywhere on the campaign trail. The national debt's a ticking time bomb that will bring us down if we don't get it under control. And the Republican Party, and this is why I've said oftentimes, and I might try to caucus to those guys. They might hate me. I've said that it is my goal to be the most unpopular freshman Republican in the United States Senate, because the Republican Party over the years has done some great things, whether it's battling slavery, battling the Klan, the Civil Rights Act. The Democrats came in with the longest filibuster in history against the Civil Rights Act, and the great Ronald Reagan, led to the downfall of the Soviet Union. But we got to step our game up. We got zero plan to attack this national debt. I was going up to Buncombe County to Asheville a couple of months ago. I've got my little clock here. I set the timer for 1 minute, went on the site usdebtclock.org, and that 1 minute, the debt had exploded $2 million, $120 million an hour, $2 billion a day, 37,000 a second. You say, well, we're doing better under Trump. Well, we are. If we brought it down, we brought the debt down from exploding at 55 to 60,000 a second to 37,000 a second. That's like saying, hey, my cocaine problem is not as bad as it used to be. I used to do this when it's going to kill you. And
That's right.
We will go off the cliff. And while we look at all these other things that make us furious, and rightly so, whether it's trying to force women to play sports against men or whatever it might be, or transgender surgeries, these are abominable. When we lose the dollar, we will drop as fast as a rock falling off a cliff, just like Britain fell with us. And that's what they're pushing for. They're pushing to replace it with something called a central bank digital currency. Right. And therefore, listen, we have got to go to war against the deep state. What does that mean? That means taking agencies out and ending those agencies. Correct. I start with the aforementioned FEMA. You saw the corruption there. And by the way, it wasn't just in Western North Carolina. When they came in, Hurricanes Matthew and Floyd in the eastern part of the state, same stuff with FEMA. Obstructionism, trying to gain power, try to block, try to take control. They got to go. The Department of Education, and we still have a Republican majority in the Congress, a Republican president. And a year into this, we still have a Department of Education. It's got to go. And, I favor codifying the Doge cuts. And Elon Musk, listen, we have about 400 federal agencies. He said, get rid of 300. We've got to take these agencies out and save the dollar. And that's going to mean war, because the Democrats are going to say, Don Brown's taking my lollipop. Like they used to say about Margaret Thatcher. They called it Margaret Thatcher, the milk snatcher.
That's right.
Listen, but it is not the role of the federal government nor does the Constitution allow for the federal government to give lollipops to everybody. It's not a lollipop factory. That's right. So if we don't get serious about this and go to war against these agencies, and that includes the tax code, by the way, the Internal Revenue Service has got to go. This whole corrupt tax scheme that was born essentially in 1913 has allowed these corrupt NGOs to exist. We've got to go to war against this communist infiltration of the deep state, or we are going to lose the country. There is no way to sugarcoat it. There's no way if, ands, or buts. There's no fancy political talk I can say, except we've got to take these agencies out, and we've got to attack the debt, and we've got to return to the original model of constitutional federalism, where all powers that are not given to the federal government are reverted to the states under the 10th Amendment.
That's exactly right.
Short question. I apologize.
No, it's the answer I was hoping to hear, because I'm 100% in alignment with you. The agency tyranny is out of control. And you could look at the Department of Justice as setting the example and the low bar there for just how unjust they are. They are not standing with we the people. And this is what has my panties in a twist this morning about what happened with Ed Martin. Disgusting. I want to talk a little bit about the financial reset. Obviously, the markets have been very interesting the last few weeks. What happened on Friday with gold, silver, et cetera. The paper pushers, the people that are selling, just ether when it comes to real gold and silver, they're selling paper versions of it, and they don't have the gold and silver to back it up. They seem to have given sort of a reprieve, an opportunity to go in and buy silver at a depreciated price in hopes that they could backstop the shorted positions that they're in. This, to me, when you look at the rest of the world, BRICS, who have now gone to gold-backed currencies and a basket of gold-backed currencies, to wit, if two BRICS nations, let's say Russia and Brazil, are trading oil and soybeans with one another, clearly oil is more expensive than soybean crops. Somebody's going to owe somebody more money when it comes to trade. So they're making up the difference in the shortcomings of their trade with gold. And that is how it is happening around the rest of the world. China's price, Asia's price for the metals, for instance, silver, the arbitrage is about $40 an ounce right now. They're more expensive, $40 an ounce for physical silver in Asia than we are here in the States. Why? Because we continue to print these synthetic pieces of paper that claim they are backed by silver. It's all BS. And I think Americans are finally waking up to it. This is part of the financial war, the reset, the Western central banks that are, I believe, who are behind this horrific government we have here in the United States. They're funding it all, and they're weaponizing every agency against we the people to get us to fund their illegitimate regime, their endless wars, etc. So as a U.S. senator, if you agree with what I just said, or if you have a piece, I want to hear if you do it or not, but how do you see yourself being effective to go against such a massive conspiracy to defraud the American people and weaponize us and use us like chattel to fund this demonic empire they've tried to colonialize around the world? Are we going to, join BRICS? Are we going to lose to BRICS? What's going to happen to America? Because you're just saying we're going to collapse if we don't get this debt under control.
Well, Ann, first of all, your commentary and your questions demonstrate a very thorough and deep understanding of the problem we're in. Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971, right. A huge mistake. Now, he tried to, and so therefore our dollar becomes fiat currency. It's no longer backed by a precious metal. That's what that means. Nixon tried to fortify the dollar, and the dollar has remained strong on its own until this massive spending has put us more and almost irretrievably in debt. But he tried to back the dollar by forcing the Arab nations into this, what we call a petrodollar arrangement. Right. So therefore, all dollars trading in, all oil bought in the world has to be traded through dollars. Now, you mentioned the BRICS nations. These BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and others who have joined in, their goal, and for your listeners and viewers, is to end the United States dollar as the international currency of trade. Okay, right. That's what they want to do. And now going back to precious metals backing for those currencies gives that even more strength. I believe that if Donald Trump were not in the White House now, they would already have succeeded. And not only that, but I mentioned the petrodollar arrangement a moment ago. Saudi Arabia has tried to pull out of that. Again, the force of Trump's personality, to a large degree, is holding that back for the moment. Trump recognizes the problem. And, part of the problem and the debt, when I started running for office, we were in the 36 trillion range. We've gone through 37, and now we're in the 38 trillion range. If you look at the service, at the United States budget, we don't have a budget often, but the outlay of U.S. payments, first Social Security, the debt, the interest on the debt is now the number 2 line item, now having surpassed military spending, and it'll become the number 1 line item. Right. Part of the reason for that interest is because these dirty central banks, and the Federal Reserve being one, are keeping interest rates high. Trump has tried to deal with the issue with Jerome Powell. He's nominated Warsh. Warsh has promised to lower rates, and that's one of the reasons there was part of the relief in the financial markets, I think, because he's promised to do that. Tillis is enforcing that. But to answer your question, what do you do? Well, first of all, you've got to go to war against the deep state. The United States doesn't have a taxing. We cannot tax our way out of this. We have to understand there is a war against the U.S. dollar, and they will replace it, as I said earlier, with a central bank digital currency. Notice the phrase central bank. The Federal Reserve, created by Congress in 1913 to swamp from Jekyll Isle, is the central bank of the United States. They want to make it illegal for you to own fiat currency. They want to issue you only central bank digital currency, which is different, by the way, from Bitcoin or anything like those. Those are cryptocurrencies. Central bank digital currency is central planning. And once that happens, it's going to be tyranny. Meyer Rothschild, the scion, the founder of the corrupt Rothschild banking cabal in Europe, once said this. He said, "Give me control of a nation's currency, and I don't care what laws you pass." I think John F. Kennedy signed an executive order 1110 in June before he was assassinated to return the printing of U.S. dollars to the U.S. Treasury and not to the Federal Reserve. We got to go after the Federal Reserve. I agree with the Pauls and others, Ted Cruz and others. It needs to be audited. If you stop and think about it, when they keep interest rates high, and here's what they do. Here's the other point I want to make. We hear about the U.S. is so much in debt to China and Japan and other nations. That's true. They buy our treasuries, but the biggest debtor, the biggest creditor that we have is the U.S. Federal Reserve. We owe more money to this monster that we created than anybody. And they print the money, they raise their rates, they make the money, they control everything. We can't audit them. I'm going to lead the charge against the Federal Reserve, and I will lead the charge against the deep state. I don't know that I can change it, but I can lead the charge, and it might cost me a lot, but I don't know how much time I've got anyway. So
I have a question on that then. If how do I want to phrase this? If the US dollar is fiat, and we're worried about whether or not our currency is the fiat dollar is going to remain the reserve currency, and we don't back it by gold or silver as our Constitution demands, and has been the law of the land, a la your explanation of Richard Nixon. What are we really fighting for then? I mean, don't we need to get this dollar backed by gold and silver? Where do you stand on that, so that we're not operating with two hands tied behind our recognize the dollar is not worth the paper it's printed on?
As I said a moment ago, or I meant to say, maybe I wasn't clear about it, but I think Richard Nixon made a huge mistake.
Yes, you did.
To disentangle the dollar from being backed by gold and silver. We need to go back to that. I mean, the BRICS nations have enough sense to go to that. As you pointed out in your example of trade between Russia and China, where you have one commodity owned by one nation outvalued another one, it is the precious metals that make the difference up to balance the trade out and to strengthen those currencies. A currency backed by precious metal at the end of the day is going to be more valuable than a piece of paper. The only thing that's kept the dollar strong is the quote unquote full faith and credit of the United States. The fact that the petrodollar has been in place, and the fact that nobody else has had anything to compete with it. But as we continue to spiral into debt, and the Republican Party, let me just say this again, the National Republican Party has zero plan to attack and reduce the debt and doesn't have the political will. I'm going to lead the charge on that. That's why I'm going to be unpopular, because we lose a dollar. Rothschild was right when he said, give me control of the nation's currency, and I don't care what law you pass. He was absolutely correct. Right. And that's what these central banks want. So we got to go to war to save the dollar and to save the Constitutional Republic. We're going to have to do that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on this one, Don, because again, we've been weakened by it. The American people have been chatteled to pay the interest on this debt that is really debt that is not worth the paper it's printed on. It's just really catastrophic what has happened to America. And I feel like we're going to be the last country that finally gets their head out of their proverbial what to actually get with the program and stand back up again. But you're right, that you're talking about targeting agencies, you're talking about targeting the Federal Reserve, and getting rid of this. An audit that Elon Musk had requested for the Fort Knox and the Federal Reserve all went bye-bye when he was effectively relieved of Doge duties, which is another calamity that but the American people have been doging this country now for quite some time. The evidence is out there, just like the election fraud evidence is all out there. It's all visible for everybody to see, but we don't have a DOJ or a Congress that's willing to even look at it, let alone act on it. And this is how, this is what I believe the president has been up against. And he needs people like you to stand in there and help him, have the extra intestinal fortitude to go against the headwinds of a corrupt swamp and a corporatocracy that is destroying our country. Don, you have, I know, limited time here, but I want to hear from your perspective. Talk to the folks of North Carolina. Tell them why you are the better choice over Whatley, the former RNC chair, and what it is you intend to do to really fortify North Carolina and, put them back on the map where they belong as a very strong, healthy economy, one that has been, that's rebounding from the Hurricane Helene and the snowstorms, et cetera, but one that has a future, because AI is a big discussionary point. And of course, your should we say the triangle there, North Carolina Research Triangle, has been very good for the economy, but the economy is shifting. So give people sort of a rundown of who you are and what you're going to do for the state.
Well, thanks, Dan. I think first off, if you're going to judge a candidate, you don't judge on rhetoric, you judge on track record when the heat got hot. Let's separate me and Whatley. I'm a proponent of medical freedom. We just got a major medical freedom endorsement. We waged war against Biden's mandates and took one major case to attack the dangerous vax mandate to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals before Biden backed down when we sued Savannah River Nuclear Solutions. Whatley pushed the jab, and he did so from the floor of the North Carolina Republican headquarters. Let's take a look at J6, for example. Whatley bragged that he was the first state chair to attack J6ers. When Mitch McConnell said that this is all the fault of President Trump, CNN asked Whatley if he disagreed with McConnell. Whatley said, no, I don't disagree with McConnell. On the other hand, I defended J6ers, which we now know is a fedsurrection. 99% of those Trump supporters did nothing harmful, didn't hit officers, didn't break anything. And so we're diametrically opposed on that. You look at election integrity. I've been endorsed by Sidney Powell. I was involved on several major legal teams looking at the 2020 election irregularities, and I use that phrase generously. Whatley, on the other hand, after 2020, comes into 2023 as the chair of the North Carolina Republican Party and has himself reelected based upon a cell phone app that he had designed, which divided the party right down the middle. My background is a military officer, a U.S. Navy JAG officer, and a criminal prosecutor. I'm the only criminal prosecutor among the Republican candidates that are running. Whatley's background is a lobbyist. So do you want a JAG officer? Do you want a military officer who has already fought for this nation? Or do you want a lobbyist who really all he's done is lobbied and served as political bureaucrat? Whatley has endorsed Tom Tillis. Before Tillis dropped out, he's endorsed Tillis. I jumped in the race to run against Tillis. You could not be more politically opposite on the Republican ticket. So if you vote for Whatley, that's going to be a vote for Tillis. You vote for me, that's going to be a vote for American freedom. I'm going to take this battle to the floor of the United States Senate. I sworn an oath to defend the Constitution as a military officer. It is my life, and I'll do that. And here in North Carolina, we still are trying to recover from Helene, the mountain counties. Trump made Whatley the recovery czar, yet I believe it was the Wall Street Journal, another major publication just a few weeks ago, said we're still $60 billion short. There are still folks who haven't gotten back into their homes. Our people have been through a second cold winter. Whatley did nothing. Down east, they've gone to war against the shrimpers. I've taken a stand in favor of our shrimpers. I think we need to ban, importing shrimp from other countries. A month or so ago, we had tons of radioactive shrimp brought in from Indonesia. I'll stand for the people in North Carolina. And I've got a track record to prove it, and you won't be disappointed. We're going to go into the Senate, and we're going to do what we need to do to at least bring attention to these issues that need to be dealt with. We're going to save this nation.
Well, I've got to tell you, everything I've heard you say, if I was living in North Carolina, I would certainly pull the lever for Don Brown for U.S. Senate North Carolina. No questions. I'd vote for you every day and twice on Sundays if we could get away with it. Apparently, you can in this country. You can vote as many times as you want. You don't even have to be alive.
if you're a Democrat, that's true. We're still lobbying you to move here, Ann. Let's at least get you a house here. What do you say?
Listen, who wouldn't love to have a house in Western North Carolina where the beautiful people are and those gorgeous hills? And I mean, it's just such striking country. Really have enjoyed my time I've been out there, and I look forward to getting back there. Don Brown, it has been an honor and a pleasure to have you on this morning. I wish you continued success. Folks can donate for you at your website. It's streaming below. Don Brown for NC, Don Brown FORNC for North Carolina.com. He's got a donate button there. And I think that your issues, your policies that you stand for are very clearly spelled out on your website. And I think anybody that heard you today can see the genuine authenticity of who you are and what you stand for and that you mean business. And if there's any way I can help you once you're in the Senate to go to war with any of these agencies and the Federal Reserve, I'm your girl. Recruit me now.
You're recruited. You are recruited in.
All right. Don, it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming by.
Thank you so much.
Take care. All right, folks. Wow, what a great, impactful interview. A very, very enlightened and intelligent man. And he has the endorsements of some incredible people too, including myself. I don't consider myself incredible, but I have endorsed him from the beginning because I understand where he's coming from, what he stands for, and what his mission is. And frankly, that's what we should get from every single public servant that decides to step in the arena and serve. He's not a politician. He is truly a man of the people, a public servant, and somebody who wants to get some accountability, unlike what we see happening in this Department of Injustice. And I will never refer to the DOJ as the DOJ again. It's going to be the DOIJ because they are injustice. Now, I want to address some of the stuff in the chat here. I'd like to talk to Big Country. You said that it was disheartening to see me endorsing Paul Renner in Florida. He's no different than all the other Israel first stooges who are destroying this country that you speak of daily. I don't think he has a chance in Florida, but if he did, we would be sold out even way worse than what DeSantis has done to us. Well, big country number one, he's never taken any AIPAC money at all. So there's that. Byron Donalds has. Now, that's number one. Number two, he's going to be with me tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern on this show. So you're welcome to jump in the chat, and I'll be sure to put these questions up big like this so that you are able to ask them, and you can ask anything you want. Paul will be there. So I hope you do take the opportunity. And to some of the MMTLP folks in here, I see Marduk. Thank you. That article that we wrote for the Gateway Pundit talking about MMTLP, which is something I would have loved to have had a chance to talk to Don about, but I was trying to keep it on his issues right now. MMTLP, for those of you who are not aware, is a stock that was never meant, a ticker that was never meant to be turned. Shall we say it was a placeholder that was never meant to be traded as a ticker. And thanks to some corrupt Wall Street brokerage houses and a corrupt agency known as FINRA, the Financial Regulatory Authority, if you can believe these names, it's hysterical. They're always the exact opposite of what they deliver. Got that stock trading and shorted into the hundreds of millions of shares that didn't exist just so Wall Street could make a buck, lots of bucks. And the real investors got screwed. And it's still an ongoing situation. We're working very diligent to try and get this rectified ASAP. A lot more to that story. And if you follow my X feed, it's there. And you can just type in hashtag MMTLP anywhere in X, and you'll get more than you can possibly handle in terms of reading. So I appreciate the comments in here. And Annie's in here. Paul Renner for Florida governor all the way. Yes, this is Annie Marie Delgado. She's a senior campaign advisor for the Renner team. I've known Annie for years. Anyhow, thank you so much. We will be back tomorrow, this time at 1 o'clock, not earlier in the day, 1 p.m. Eastern tomorrow with Paul Renner from the Renner campaign. And I hope that you all have a chance to join us then and hear about this particular candidate who's running for the governor of Florida. So I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks for stopping by. I am still in Colorado. I'll be back in Florida on the 17th. So wherever you are, hope you're staying warm. And just give it some serious thought, folks. This document has got to be observed. We're still not there yet. In fact, after what we saw with Ed Martin yesterday, we're so far from it. God bless you all. Have a great day. Hi, I'm Ann Vandersteel. I want to talk to you a little bit about your health. Part of my daily routine is to get up in the morning and get a little exercise on. If I have time for a mile or 7, doesn't matter. I get out the door every single day. It's important to get my body moving and get that oxygen flowing through my brains. What is also equally important is what I put in my body after I exercise. I rely on VandersteelHealth.com, where I have a delicious selection of superfoods and other supplements. But first and foremost for me are my superfoods. I have a delicious shake every single day. It is organic, all made in the United States of America, non-GMO, never processed before, dehydrated superfoods. And when they reconstitute with water, milk, or whatever juice you like, it makes a delicious, healthy, plant-based protein supplement. And I say supplement because, frankly, I use this as a meal replacement. This is what's helped me lose the last 20 pounds of COVID. I'm back down to my fighting college weight, fitting in my college clothes, and feeling better than ever. So go to VandersteelHealth.com and get your delicious superfoods. Get on the transformation program with us. It's a 30-day kickoff, and it will get your day starting out great. And watch the weight just fall off. Watch the energy increase, the brain fog lift, and of course the ancillary benefits in your hair, skin, and nails. All these things, you are what you eat. Remember that. Go to VandersteelHealth.com.